that was a joke. We're friends. We can. I'm sorry, Joe. Continue.
No, it's a great honor to not only be with you, but to have you here in my hometown. Lynn and I and our kids are citizens of the state of Israel. We're dual citizens. That means we get to vote twice. It's like like living in Chicago, I guess. Some of you are obviously from Chicago, and you know. Anyway, and we live here in Jerusalem. We actually live in an apartment not far from the American Embassy. And we had coffee at the embassy a few months ago with the ambassador, and so it's an honor to follow him, and it's a real honor to be with you. Thank you. I'm going to start with that. I also want to say, just real quickly, how many of you have never been here before? Wow, that's almost everybody. Wow. Just about. It's one thing to stand with Israel. That's the phrase you often hear. Please stand with Israel. You have come to stand in Israel, or in this case, sit. Nevertheless, during a rocket war. Thank you. God bless you for standing in Israel and sitting in Israel in a very challenging week. And it's a testament. It doesn't seem abnormal to you. When I bring tours here, the first thing I ask people is, how many people have read, any of my books or the blog or whatever? And it's not a quiz, it's not a test, like if you haven't, you can't be here. But I say to people, why are you here? Like, if you've read my books, if you read my blog or my Twitter, why are you here? Don't you know how dangerous this is? But you come because you sense God is in it. Yeah. And you obey. And so thank you, Greg. Thank you for your love for Israel and for bringing all these people. So, look, I happen to have had the opportunity. Let me dispel something you said already, which is I'm not a psychic, I'm not a prophet, I run a nonprofit. I'm not a clairvoyant. I know some of you are old enough to remember Miss Cleo. I didn't used to call her up in the middle of the night. But she was a psychic. I think you could call her a 900 number at great expense. And somehow she didn't see the IRS coming to nab her for tax evasion. That seemed to evade her mystical sense. I'm a failed political consultant. Everyone I ever worked for lost. You're laughing because that's not your resume. But if you had my resume, you wouldn't be laughing. I was once in the year 2000, I was on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's comeback campaign team. He had been Prime Minister from 96 to 99. He lost. Now he's trying to come back. It took him 9 more years. I played no role whatsoever. So I'm not seeing things in the future. What I'm doing is taking the Bible, best as I understand the scriptures and the prophecies. Some of my novels are based on prophecy. Some of them are not. The current service is not specifically. But it does inform my worldview. And then I take worst case scenarios and I extrapolate what is a realistic, but hopefully never true, worst case scenario. So most recently, it was interesting, just before the Persian Gamble launched, I was back in Washington, happened to have lunch with a friend of mine. He now is the second most powerful person in the world, but when I met Mike Pence, he was just a congressman, and he was just a reader of the novel. So that was fun. He asked me to lunch, we had lunch. So we've stayed very close, and I had lunch with him at the White House. At the end of that lunch, he said, "Have you ever met the president?" I said, "No, I've never even set foot in the Oval Office. I mean, I've written a lot of scenes in there, but I've never actually been there." I said, "Follow me." And the next thing I know, we're in the Oval Office with Secretary of State Pompeo, National Security Advisor John Bolton, and Pence, and then the president walks in. And I know that they're about to have a meeting with the Czech Prime Minister soon. I can see them setting up for it. So I shake hands. I said, "Mr. President, thank you." This was not on the plan. I wasn't on the schedule. So I thought, I have maybe just this one sentence I can get out. So I said, "Mr. President, thank you for being the most pro-life and the most pro-Israel president in my lifetime and probably ever." And, the reason I say that is because he then said, "Well, why don't you just come, sit down, let's chat." And one of the things he wanted to chat about was the new book. And Pence says, says, well, Mr. President, I know we've got this meeting with the Czech Prime Minister, so I know we don't have time. I just wanted you two to know each other. Joel's an influential author, and he's an evangelical, and no, we have time, come and sit. So he sits down behind the Resolute desk. I sit directly across from him. The Vice President of the United States is on my right. The Secretary of State is on my left. John Bolton pulls up a chair. And I have to tell you, what I'm thinking at that moment will tell you a lot about me, but I'm thinking of a little cartoon on Sesame Street that one of these things is not like the other.
Oh my God.
So he says, so he starts saying, well, tell me about your book. And then he goes, wait, Mike, and he turns back to the Vice President and says, did you just say that Joel is an evangelical? And he said, yes. He said, you're an evangelical? I said, yes, Mr. President, I am. He said, but your name, it's Joel Rosenberg. Isn't that Jewish? How can you be Jewish and believe in Jesus? And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. And I've been asked that question all over the world. And I want, like Elaine on Seinfeld, I want to go, get out! But, anyway, so I had a chance to talk about what it means to be a Jewish person who believes in Jesus and do it in the Oval Office, asked by the President of the United States. Anyway, he did ask, so tell me about the novel. So I said, let me give you the very short version, especially since you asked me a question and I've just gone on and on. So I will answer it in 60 seconds.
That was a great story, though.
Well, I so I said, okay, here's the elevator pitch. Mr. President, the premise of the Persian Gamble is this. What if the Iranian regime, the Persian regime, took the $150 billion that President Obama gave them for not even signing? The Iranians didn't sign the deal, that they just sort of had to verbally agree with. But let's just say they took that $150 billion and they secretly went to North Korea and they used that money to try to buy a half dozen fully operational nuclear warheads right off the shelf. That's the premise, I said, of the Persian Gamble. And he sort of sat back in the chair and he said, wow, well, how do you know that's not happening already, Joel? I said, well, I'm trusting, Mr. President, you and the men in this room are working every single day to make sure my work doesn't come true.
Oh my God.
New material since I saw you last.
So you lie.
He's got new material.
Things continues for them, but
Well, we talked about Iran, and then he said, he asked, well, tell me a little bit about yourself, okay? So he said, I understand you're a dual citizen. I said, yeah, don't tell Congressman Omar. I actually do have dual loyalties. I love both countries. And I said, I actually live in Israel. I got two sons in the army here, one in special forces, and they're one in an elite special forces, the other in a special forces unit. And I said that we live close to the embassy. And he said, yeah, the embassy. I said, he goes, how's that going over here? I said, you're the king of Israel. I mean, people didn't know what to make of you at first, but this is huge. People didn't think it could be done because it was 25 or 30 years, whatever it's been. Never happened. And then he went into this fun, fairly long, intricate story about how he was told it was going to cost $1 billion to move the embassy. He's like, I'm not spending $1 billion. Then he said, David Friedman called him and said, Mr. President, we have a property. It's in Jerusalem. We just need maybe $300,000 to do some upgrades on the security, but we don't need to build a whole new building, not yet. And Trump said that he laughed at Friedman and said, look, I can't go from $1 billion to 300,000. I mean, that's I'll do $500,000. Will that be enough? For sure. All right, good. So we need this thing for $500,000. I said, well, it's very impressive. Just tell me more about yourself. You live in Israel, you live in Jerusalem. Now, I was interested in hearing from him, but he was asking me, so I said, should I, shouldn't I? Okay, it's probably my only chance. I said, Mr. President, I need to tell you that I was a never Trumper until the Thursday before the election. Now, Greg, how many times do you think the term never Trumper has been used in the current Oval Office? Judging from the look in his eye, not that often. But admittedly, with the best security force in the world, he didn't call on them. He went with it. He said, so what happened on Thursday before the election? I said, well, my wife came to me and said, we have to send in our absentee ballots today. Okay, there's no more time. We have to send them FedEx to the United States from here, and you have to decide. We have to decide. I said, yeah. She said, now, I'm only telling this story because I said it to the president. I'm not trying to be political here. I know it sounds political, but I'm just relating. So you don't have to agree with me. I'm just relating. So long story short, I said, so Lynn said, so here's the thing. I don't think you're going to vote for her, right? I said, no. She said, so there's only two choices here. We're at the end of the road here. You have to pick one. And if you're not voting for her, then you're voting for him, or you're not voting at all. So your challenge, your problem, Joel, is that you don't trust him to keep the conservative promises that he's made, or the promises specifically to the evangelicals. And I'm saying this to the president in the Oval Office, and I say, that's right. I said to my wife, I don't trust him to keep those promises. She said, but you trust her to keep her promises, right? I said, yes. Well, okay, so you have to make a decision on the hope that he might keep some of them. And I said, Mr. President, I want to thank you. You have kept so many more promises than I would have expected. And I listed 8 or 9 very specific things, including the embassy, of course, but that, and pro-life judges and pro-life justices. And I when we left later, the vice president said to me, you didn't have to confess in there. I felt like I did. Like that might be my only meeting with him. And I think he needs to know that people, look, the Bible commands us to pray for our leaders and to give honor where honor is due. Now, I have issues with him still. Like, I didn't use that moment to go into overspending or, his tweeting. Paying off a porn star. I have issues still. But in terms of the promises he made to us, he has been giving a lot of them. And I think a person who has had a lot of people against him at least has to hear what we think he's doing right and affirm this, honor that, even if we can't agree on everything. And anyway, it was one of the things that Lynn disputes, Lynn's here tonight, but Lynn disputes that she said it this way, but I heard it this way, so I'll just share it. Just as I was relating to the president why we really needed to vote for Trump on faith, on hope, she said, and also, since you've been a friend with Mike and Karen Pence all these years, are you really going to vote against a ticket where someone on that ticket has actually read and liked your books? That's your plan? So, she's not saying it quite that way. Maybe I heard it that way, but it is true. And now, by the way, I bring him his and her copies. Because when he was the governor, we went out to see him once. He invited us to come visit him, and he said, I asked, hey, have you read the new one? I sent you the advanced copies. He said, I haven't seen it yet. Karen has it. Whenever you send it, I get to it eventually, but she sort of runs off with it. So when he became vice president, I had my first meeting with him. I brought him his and hers. I said, listen, you're the second most powerful man in the world. You should have your own copy. You've got a lot of tensions in marriage anyway in life. Let this not be an additional.
Well, Joel, when we look at the last day scenario, especially looking at Ezekiel 37 and 38, we see God tells us that the Jewish people would be scattered to the 4 corners of the planet. That happened, of course. Then the horrific Holocaust took place. And then on May 14, 1948, they became a nation again. And the dry bones came together, flesh came on the bones. And actually, I talked to this, last night we had General Golan speak to us. Very high-ranking senior officer, and so I mentioned this to him, and I said, General, and he agreed that this was a fulfillment of prophecy. But then I said, then the Bible talks about a force called Magog attacking Israel, and I said some scholars believe that could be Russia. But one thing we're certain of is one of the allies of Magog is Persia, modern day Iran. And he knew all about that. And I said, what do you think about that? And he kind of moved to another subject. But, even Prime Minister Netanyahu has acknowledged that Ezekiel 38 has been fulfilled. That this is
36 and 37.
Excuse me, right, exactly right. I'm a little jet lagged still, so right. Thank you for correcting me. So with all this in play, tell us the role of how you see Iran could play in the end times, marching with Magog. Do you think Magog could potentially be Russia, and things that are happening actually right now in real time, how they could be playing into that scenario?
So to give you the much shorter answer than I gave you for the first answer to, yes, I do.
Good night.
And a good night, folks. It was great having you. Yes, look, there's no question. Persia is mentioned specifically. It's the only country in the list of the coalition countries that will come against Israel in the last days that is super clearly identifiable, right? Because Persia, until 1935, was the official legal name of the country we now know as the Islamic Republic of Iran. The first country in the list is Magog. Now, Magog, is a little more challenging. I wrote a book years ago, my first nonfiction book called Epicenter, and in that book I walked through very carefully what do we know about Magog. And for tonight, just to make it super quick, the evidence is overwhelmingly clear that we're talking about Russia, and perhaps some of the other former Soviet republics, but definitely Russia. And in fact, the details are in the book. But the point is, the interesting thing is that Russia and Iran are supposed to form an alliance with a number of other countries. Russia and Iran haven't had an alliance in the last 2,500 plus years since Ezekiel wrote the prophecy, until now. It started in the mid-1990s. It accelerated when Putin took power in 2000. It accelerated even further when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad became president of Iran, and it has just continued to get closer and closer and closer. Another country that's in that list is a country called Gomer. Now that is not where Gomer Pyle is from. That's Turkey. And I wrote in 2006 that the evidence suggests strongly that Gomer is what we would call modern day Turkey. Now people at the time thought it's a little nutty because Turkey is close to Israel, not physically, but has a good relationship, has diplomatic relationships. It is one of the few Muslim countries in the world that has a diplomatic relationship with Israel. So this just seemed crazy to people. But now, under Recep Erdogan, Turkey has moved to the dark side, right? They moved harshly against Israel and much closer to Russia and Iran. And just a few weeks ago, the three leaders had a summit to develop their geopolitical alliance. So I think that the trend lines are moving. What's strange now is that when you look at the Syria war and how horrific that is, more than 500,000 Syrians dead, millions, 5 or 6 million Syrians have fled the country. It's only a country of about 25 million anyway. Maybe 25% have fled. Who's fighting in that country? The prophecy says that the alliance against Israel will come primarily from the north, against the northern mountains of Israel. You were just up, I believe, on the Lebanon and Syrian borders when you were up in Galilee. So Bental, there you go. So you were looking into Syria. Those are the mountains of Israel. You've been on them. And they're not the only ones, but they're the primary ones. Well, who is fighting on the same side in Syria, just above those mountains? Russia, Iran, and Turkey. So that's not to say, we have to be super clear, that's not to say the prophecy is going to unfold in the next few minutes, days, weeks, hours. But we may not be that far off. Israel is described in Ezekiel 38 as living securely in the land. Now you can say, well, the last few days, is that secure? By Israeli standards, yes. Tragically, 4 Israelis died in that war, but 690 rockets were fired at us. 4 Israelis died. Tragic that those are, because we have the almost miraculous Iron Dome system shooting down many of them, we don't have that. That's a super terrible annoyance to people who aren't living there, and scary to the children and the people that are living there, but ultimately it's not deadly the way it ought to be in a normal missile war. So what am I saying? Israel has the strongest air force in the world, in the region, strongest ground forces, strongest special forces, best intelligence. We have submarines. We have submarines parked right off the coast of Iran. Right now, they just wait every day for the order, should it become necessary, God forbid, to fire nuclear weapons. Well, so they say. I don't know that or who's rated. As an American, I've read that, but I'm just saying to just turn Tehran into glass is necessary. We don't want to do it. My point is, Israel is more secure today, and Israelis feel more secure than at any other time in 4,000 years. So, does that check the box? I don't know. Well, I don't know. Could we see major peace moves in the next few months or years? We still could. I'm not particularly optimistic about a peace treaty anytime soon with the Palestinians, though the president is working very hard on the deal of the century. But I've spent time in the last 2 years with the leaders of Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. United Arab Emirates. And 2 of those have peace treaties, and 2 of them want them. We are moving towards, I think, the point where Gulf states may make major moves in the next few years. So we may get a point where Israel's feeling more secure. So we may not be at the point where God would check the box yet, but most Israelis would be like, this is the most secure and prosperous. That's the other element that we've ever felt. So does that mean that could set the ground, the prerequisites for the attack? It could. We could see this in our lifetime. We don't know if it happens before the rapture or after, but I'll just tell you from my own personal experience, I hope that it happens in our lifetime. Not because I want to see Israel attack, but because I want to see, and I don't even want to see the judgment that falls, though it's clear. What I want to see is the end of chapter 39, where God says, I pour out my Holy Spirit on the whole house of Israel. What's the job of the Holy Spirit? It's to draw people to his Son, to the Son of the Father. And this will be the most exciting moment in our history. And I would love to hear about you, preaching the gospel and teaching these passages as in the build-up when they all say we're crazy, and then people see it with their own eyes.
You mentioned the rapture, and so let's take the big picture of what you've just described, which we're so close to that scenario playing out in real time. It could continue on and not accelerate anymore, and then again it could just boom, like dominoes, or to use the biblical analogy, like birth pangs closer together. But I think that, we read about the tribulation period, we read about the emergence of Antichrist and all these puzzle pieces that are there. But it seems to me, my belief is that there is nothing that needs to happen for the rapture to happen. In other words, the rapture can happen today, tonight, tomorrow. We know the second coming isn't going to happen until at least 7 years. Okay, so that's in the future. We know the millennium isn't going to happen until, after the tribulation period. So there's certain things we know will not happen immediately, but the rapture can happen at any time. Tell us for me.
And although I think all these folks are thinking, maybe not till Thursday night we paid for this whole trip. If we could just make it through just a couple more days.
I think they'd be okay with it. I really do, yeah.
They would be, they would have to be okay.
What goes up must come down, right? So, caught up in the rapture, when Christ returns, he sets foot on the Mount of Olives, and he has 10,000 of his saints who go up, come down, right back to Israel.
And we're on Mount Scopus. That's just a mountain connected to the Mount of Olives. So we would just have to walk at this point.
So, to tell us for, not everybody here necessarily knows, what is the rapture? Why is the rapture an important thing to believe today? And just those 2 questions alone. Good.
Those are doctoral dissertation questions, just for the record. But the rapture is when we see that most clearly in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, where the Lord, in an instant, just in a blink of an eye, just scoops up all of the born-again believers in the world, and he says we meet him in the air. First, what happens is a trumpet is sounded, and then the dead in Christ are resurrected, and then we meet Christ in the air.
President Trump plays a role in this, or is this a different Trump?
Trump, oh well, he could be the last Trump, we don't know. Yeah, and there's a doctrine that's important in biblical theology called the doctrine of imminence, which means that the rapture could happen at any moment. There's not a specific prophetic sign or moment or event that the Bible says has to happen before the rapture. So it could happen at any moment. Paul lived and taught as though it could happen at any moment. Peter lived and taught as though it could happen at any moment. It didn't happen at those moments, but we live, certainly I know you and I speak about this, teach about this, and try to live this way, and I hope you are too. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen for another 50 or 100 or whatever years, but we're supposed to live with the urgency. That includes not only a holy life, but being a witness, being a gospel witness to those who have not yet heard or have not yet decided to receive Christ or reject Him. Now, it turns out, from 48 forward, that we know that a lot of prophetic events apparently will happen and are happening. The fact that you are sitting in Israel, a reconstituted sovereign state of Israel right now, with the Jews, myself included, having come back from all over the world after centuries of exile, the ancient ruins have been rebuilt and continue to be rebuilt. These are major end-time prophecies. These are prophecies that most of our church fathers thought would never literally come true. They thought it was metaphor. It couldn't. Come on, like Augustine, Luther. And this is the best God had at the time. But they could not be persuaded that this was literally true, that God was literally going to recreate the sovereign state of Israel and bring the Jews back. It just seemed so crazy to them that they had to come up with that this was allegory and apply it to the church. But here you are in a fully constituted state. Now, if you had been born, let's say you had been born in 38 and you were 10 years old in 1948 and you saw this on television or something. I talked to Jim Dobson once, and he said that he remembers his mother calling him over to the radio and saying, Jimmy, you got to listen to this. We are listening right now to prophecy coming true. The United Nations is declaring the state of Israel is being reborn. And, he was like 10 or 15, whatever he was. This was huge to him. And but imagine that I don't think we would have thought it would go 71 years without the other prophecies coming true. That seems hard. But that's because prophecy is a biblical way of looking down the corridor of history through a telephoto lens. And when you do that, or a zoom lens, it compresses space, right? So you can't see the ups and downs, you can't see the granular nature of all that's happening. You just see the distance, and it's here. But it turns out there's a lot of things that happen, and more time than we would have expected. So that's the rapture answer. Your other question is, why is that relevant to us today?
Well, why is it important to believe this? Because someone's saying, well, I don't really believe in it. I don't think Bible prophecy is relevant to us today. I don't think we should even care about it. And I would disagree, and I know you would as well. Why is this teaching that is not as prominent maybe today as it was back in the early 70s or in other times historically? It's sort of fallen out of favor among some. Why is it an important thing to believe in? How should it impact?
Well, it's important because God said it. That's the bottom line is God said these things are important. 27% of the Bible is prophecy. Okay, 27%. 1 out of 4 things that God said in the scriptures is about the future. Now, half of those have already come true. That's how we know that we can trust the other half. Most of the next half deal with this second up to the second coming. We get an enormous amount of information in the Bible between, wherever we are in time, space, and the second coming of Christ, the literal second coming when He touches down on this mountain just to our left, I think, or right, whatever, wherever we are. The rest of the prophecies deal with after that, which is not that many prophecies. We get some. So it's important because God says it's important, and He says it not so that we get into big theological arguments with each other, which is unfortunately what a lot of people who deal with this topic, end times prophecy, have done. They've gotten into a lot of arguments with a lot of people. Look, if you're born again and you're not sure where you stand on the rapture, you're still coming. So you'll know when it happens.
By default, it's coming.
So we don't have to persuade you, but it's important to know. Secondly, it should give all of us a sense of urgency. Why are people not teaching it? Well, they don't want to be associated with the prophecy nuts. The people who build the websites that everything's glowing fire and it's all, every sentence is in capital letters and there's 92 exclamation points and they're always
black.
Exactly. Have some decaf. It's all we win. And then in the early 70s, there were people who, maybe not that, but they overreached. They said, this is what the Bible says, this is what I think it says, and this is how it's exactly going to happen. Or that's the way it felt. And a lot of people, when it didn't happen that way, began throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So that's a mistake, and we've got to be careful. That's why I just told you, here's the set of things that suggest that we're getting closer and closer to the war of Gog and Magog, but we don't know if we're there. You'll know when you know. If Greg tells you we know, well, let's just make sure we talk about it before you say that. But the point is, it'll be pretty clear, and then we'll deal with that. But a lot of pastors either haven't studied it or they don't want to get associated with the prophecy nuts. But there's a lot of people who teach false gospels. But Greg doesn't say, I'm not preaching the gospel. I don't want to be associated with the nuts that are teaching it completely wrong. He says, I need to do more to make it clear. And that's what the entire church would be doing. But most of the church is not. And I would say even in Greg's world, even in the Calvary Chapel world, you're seeing a lot less than we used to. And that's an issue. But why ultimately is it relevant? Because of two main reasons. Because we should live as though mom and dad are about to walk in the door at any moment. You know what you were like as a teenager, and if mom and dad were going to walk in the door in any second, the house might have been a little cleaner, the blood on your brother might have been a little bit more cleaned off, and they had not been, in a big cursing storm. There are things we should live differently in light of the fact that our Father is sending the Son, our King, mind you, at any moment. That's one. And the second thing is, we shouldn't be saying just now, we ought to be telling our neighbors and everyone else on the planet, the King is coming, and we want you to know him and be adopted into his royal family. Amen. And what excites me most about living here is that we are living in the greatest season. And you heard it's fascinating to hear an Orthodox Jewish ambassador representing the state of the United States to Israel, talk about living at the greatest moment of seeing the prophecies fulfilled and the U.S. relationship with Israel. Okay, let me, as a lowercase a ambassador of Christ, say we are living at the greatest moment in human history. For those reasons, but to me much more importantly, because Jewish people and Muslims are more open to the gospel than they ever have been in all of the last 2,000 years of Judaism and 1,400 years of Islam. And that's why we need to engage in telling everybody, China, Brazil, everybody, but especially I want to tell my people. And I want to love my neighbors and love my enemies. And I want to tell everybody. And if the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia invites me, as he did last fall, to bring a group of evangelicals to meet with him, I want to make sure we don't leave that room until he's heard about Jesus. So in the meeting, I said, I noticed that you're meeting with some Christian leaders this year in Egypt and Great Britain. That's fascinating. Yes. This is the new Saudi Arabia. We're trying to move in a new, open, moderate direction. Great. I said, now you've invited the first ever group of evangelicals in the history of the Saud royal family to come and meet with you in your palace here in Riyadh? He said, yes, well. I said, we are honored. I said, now, let me just, as we start this conversation, note that I'm guessing that the term evangelical Christian is not a term used much here in the kingdom. Is that a fair, right? Saudi Arabia, the fount of radical Islam, Wahhabism, 15 of the 19 hijackers on 9/11. Not exactly our best close buddy kindred spirit over the last, whatever. So I'm guessing this term evangelical Christian not used much. Maybe he laughed and said, "That's probably fair." I said, well, we have a dear friend of mine on the delegation. He's an ordained pastor. And his name is Skip Heinzen. He pastors a wonderful congregation in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I wonder if you could just take a moment and explain, what does it mean to be an evangelical Christian? What do we believe? What motivates us? Would that be okay, Your Royal Highness? And he said, yes, please, absolutely. And Skip, you would be very proud of him. He did a great job. You would have been teasing him, but still, I mean, even then, after the hair and all the height and the whole thing, then you would have been very proud of him. And he did a great job. And God is opening up unique doors in this country and among our neighbors. And me personally, I'm motivated because I don't know how much time there is. I don't know how much time I have, right? The Lord could take me tonight, tomorrow. But I also don't know how long until He comes. And when I see all the signs, I say, all right, it could be 100 years, it could be 200 years, but it could be tonight. So I don't want to see Jesus one day and but I don't want to see Him and have Him say to me, dude, I'm glad the whole thing with the books worked out, but didn't you tell anybody about me? I mean, what? Did you not understand the Great Commission? Go ye therefore and make all disciples. I mean, what was it in Greek? All right, well, actually it was, but still. All those translations. I want to hear what you want to hear. Well done, my good and faithful servant. And so this is why my wife and I started the Joshua Fund, our ministry to strengthen the church here in Israel and the Palestinian territories in the region. Why? Because we want to help finish the task. If possible, if the Lord is, again, we're excited.
So here you are now, a Messianic Jew, a Jew who believes in Jesus, living in Israel. And when you engage other Jewish people, secular Jews, maybe religious Jews, in conversations about Jesus, this is a hot button issue, obviously.
Yes, it is.
I had lunch with a Orthodox rabbi today, and we had a very interesting discussion, talked about a lot of things we held in common, and then we started talking about Jesus, and he was fine, hearing my views, and I told him what I believed and what we did, and then we started talking about...
You told him what you believe?
Absolutely.
All right, I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
Of course you did.
Yeah, but then we
Don't
started...
invite Greg to come sit with you unless you're planning to have that conversation.
But then we started talking about Messianic Jews, and I could see this was a point of departure for him. He had, it's like, I'm like a Gentile. Hey, you Gentiles want to believe in Jesus and come and love Jewish people and support Israel? Great. But all of a sudden, when someone who's Jewish, like yourself, believes, now there can be a tension. Do you face that tension? And what is the best way you think would be to share the gospel in particular with somebody who is Jewish?
So yes, we absolutely face that. We face it a lot less than I would have expected. Not just me and Lynn, but our sons. We have 4 sons: Caleb, Jacob, Jonah, and Noah. And 25, almost 23, almost 21, and 14. People joke about why is there this big gap between Jonah and Noah? And I like to say because Jesus said in Matthew 24, he's not coming back again to the days of Noah. So I thought if we're holding him back, we better have a Noah. So if you don't remember anything else from this evening, we're living in the days of Noah. So with our 2 middle sons in the army, they had amazing opportunities to talk about Jesus. And it's not like they're trying, it just comes up because there's very Orthodox, nationally religious guys in the unit, and then there's super secular, drink anything, sleep with anyone guys in the unit. And then there's one of these things that's not like the other, that's my sons in each of their units. And so